Willkommen zu einem weiteren Vortrag. Welcome to another lecture. Today's lecture is in English. That's why I'm going to give our little opener in English as well to hopefully welcome some international students or viewers. Our guest today is Dr. Maria Pimenta Lange. She studied food engineering and brewing science at Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium and at Universidade Católica Portuguesa in Portugal. Yes. Okay. She earned her PhD in agricultural sciences and biological engineering. From 2001 to 2022, she worked here at TU Braunschweig at the Institute of Plant Biology. Currently, she is working at the Julius Kühn Institute, where she is team leader of the research group Plant Stress Management. And today, she will give us a little insight into her research with the lecture, Plants for Future, Fit Plants for Challenging Times. As always, questions can be asked after the lecture, but you are invited to ask your questions in German or in English. And now, enjoy, and the stage is yours.
Okay. Can you hear me well? I think so. Perfect. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for the nice introduction and for inviting me to take part in this TU for Future lectures. It's really a big pleasure. So, as you heard, my name is Maria Pimenta Lange. I'm a plant physiologist. So today I'm going to talk about plants. But before I do that and before I go to my talk, I thought I should introduce myself and give you a little bit about my background. So, as you heard, I studied in Porto, where I did my Master in Food Engineering. So I'm Portuguese, I come from the north of Portugal, and therefore I studied in Porto. And during my studies, in the last semester of my master, I decided to go for an Erasmus exchange program. And there I went to Louvain, to Belgium, and to the agriculture science faculty. And there I got very much interested in brewing sciences and malting sciences. Found it very nice. So I went back to Portugal, finished my studies, and decided I go back to Belgium. And there I did a diploma in brewing sciences. So I'm also a brewer. And later on I did also my PhD there in agriculture sciences, biological engineering. My PhD was dealing with malting processes and optimizing biological reactions during barley germination for malting production. So I did my PhD, and then I wanted to keep doing sciences. So I went to Japan as a postdoc to Riken in Tokyo. And there I stood 3 years. And why did I go to Japan? Well, because there they had a very powerful group working in plant hormones. And plant hormones, I knew, were very important for barley germination and also for malting processes. So I thought this is a good place to continue my research. And indeed it was. Then, after that, I moved again and I went to Edinburgh, to the Heriot-Watt University, where I was also a postdoc, so a research associate, because there also they have strong research on malting production. Good, and this was my life as a PhD and postdoc and student, and then I came to continental Europe, and to Germany. And why Germany? Well, it was mostly for personal reasons. My husband is German. So I wanted to come here. And first, I got my first permanent position at Sanjin. It was a BASF company as a senior scientist. And I was in Gattersleben. And then I came here to the TU in Braunschweig to the plant biology as a scientist and also lecturer. And here I was until very recently. And as you heard, very recently, last November, I moved to the Julius Kühn Institute, also here in Braunschweig, in the plant protection in horticulture at Urban Green Department, where I'm a scientist and team leader. And just to give you my visit card, if you want later to contact me, well, here's where I am now, and I'm doing research in plant stress management, ecological and sustainable concepts for plant production and plant protection in horticulture. And I'm also investigating cultivation parameters for horticultural crops. So here's my contact. Later on, if you need to contact me, please do so. Good. And now let's go to the talk of tonight. And the title I chose was Plants for Future, Fit Plants for Challenging Times. And if you don't mind, I would like to start from the end of the title. What do I mean by challenging times? Well, the big challenge we have now is that hunger is increasing. And we have a world population that is also increasing. So if you look to the numbers there, that are this data from the United Nations and FAO, you see that in 2022, we were almost reaching 8 billion people. And we need to get food for all of these people. And unfortunately, the number of people suffering hunger is increasing. As you can see there on the right, in 2020, the numbers were almost reaching 10% of the population. This is tremendous high. So we have to do something. This is our real big challenge, to change that, and that everybody has enough food. So we need to get enough food, but we need to have resilient and sustainable agri-food systems. And this is not an easy task. And it's not an easy task because climate variability and extremes are happening. And also, in last years, we had problems with COVID. So this made it even more difficult because COVID gave problems in getting food supply sometimes in certain places, increased also some unemployment, and so on. So this didn't make it easier. And the big problem is also conflicts and wars. Because now we see that also in Ukraine, you can see that food that is produced in Ukraine and the cereals that are produced there cannot reach the places where they are needed. And also, conflict and wars make sure that people are just displaced, they are refugees, and so it's getting even worse. So it's not an easy task, really, to get to fight hunger and malnutrition and to get resilient and sustainable agri-food systems in the actual situation. And sustainability is really a very important issue. And it's so important that it's a global political goal. So if you look, the United Nations have an agenda for sustainable development goals for 2030. The European Union has the Green Deal. Europe should be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And of course, Germany has also a sustainability strategy, right? So if we now look more close to the Sustainability United Nations strategy, we see that many, so from the 17 goals that the United Nations have, several have to do with sustainable plant production, right? So if we start from the number 1, no poverty. So many small farmers, small plant producers depend on the plant production for living. So this is critical. If there's no sustainable plant production, there will be no jobs. Also, they will not produce enough. They cannot live from that. So they will be poor. The zero hunger, well, this is, of course, has to do with plant production because plants, they are on the bottom chain of the food production. They produce food by themselves, right? So they take it from the sun and from photosynthesis. So plants are extremely important in the whole chain of food production, and without plants, there's no food. So Zero hunger means we have to take care of plants. Good health and well-being. Yeah, plants are healthier. They are important for a good nutrition and for health. So this is also an important issue. Also, clean water and sanitation. Plant production uses a lot of clean water. So clean water is important for that, but also plant production can make problems to clean water because of use of fertilizers or pesticides. So a sustainable plant production is important to keep clean water and sanitation. Decent work and economic growth. This is also to do with no poverty. So these little farmers and little plant producers, they should have decent work to get enough money for their living, right? And so these small producers of plants have to get that. Responsible consumption and production. This is a very important issue also for sustainable plant production. Responsible consumption and production, you know, there is 1/3 of the produced food is wasted. So, and also in plant production, there's a lot of waste in the food for plant food production. We have to fight against that because we need more food to feed the people. So sustainable and responsible consumption and production is also an issue for sustainable plant production. Okay, so now looking for the German sustainability strategy. Also, many issues have to do with plant production, right? So 50% of the pesticides should be reduced until 2030. Water quality. Nitrate should be reduced in the groundwater by 2030. Organic agriculture area to 30% by 2030. So this has also to do with sustainable plant production. And we should protect ecosystems, biodiversity, and landscape quality also. And now to reduce CO2 emissions, this also have to do with the next point, that is to protect peatlands. This is a very important issue, and peatlands are not just a German issue, it's a worldwide issue, because they are just around 3% of the global land area, but they contribute to up to 33% of the organic carbon storage. So peatlands store more carbon than all the forests together. So this is a very, very important issue, and therefore the German government has this policy to protect peatlands, and peat is used as soil, a substrate for plant production. Yeah? So it should be decreased for commercial purposes, should be reduced by 2030, and for hobby, it should be no more peat in this pot soil that you buy by 2060. So we should go, therefore, peat-free. This is a very, very important issue. So now, if we look for the plant food production in Germany, and what are the problems and wishes of the plant food producers? So if you ask them, the first thing they will tell you is drought and heat, particularly drought. In the last years, there's been a problem in Germany and other countries as well, and so they have problems to produce their plant food because they have to water a lot, there's heat, there's drought, and so on. Inflation. Yeah, the costs are increasing for everyone and for them as well, so it makes that the plant production is more expensive. This is also to do with energy costs. And energy costs, particularly for glass house production, but also from outside. You need to water the plant, so you need energy for that. You need machines that go to the fields and so on. Also decreased consumption. This was actually a big surprise for me, but actually plant food consumption is decreasing. And people are buying less fresh products, and so plant food as well. I don't know exactly why. Maybe there's a change in the consumption habits. Maybe people got more used to eat ready-prepared food or canned food. I don't know. Then COVID-19 was also a problem for plant food production in Germany. And this has to do also with the next issue, which is lack of personnel. Many workers that come here to harvest the plants in Germany are not Germans. They come as seasonal workers from Eastern countries, particularly Romania and Poland. And so during COVID, of course, these workers could not come to here. So there was really a problem in the fields to harvest the plants and so on, because there was not enough people to do so. But actually, this lack of personnel is something even more than that. The plant food producers, they complain because they say there is no young people that want to do this job anymore. We don't have followers. So the small producers say, these family producers, our jobs, our company will finish because there is no one that wants to continue doing that. So we need to make sure that this is also attractive for young people, and that maybe young people understand that the production of plant food is important for everyone. So it's a very important job. Now, if we ask the wishes, so what these plant food producers have as wishes, they will tell you, of course, they need alternative methods for plant production. Yeah? So they have to reduce, for instance, pesticides, but the pests, they are still there. So they have to find alternatives for that. So they need new plant protection products. And of course, they need new resistant varieties. And these new resistant varieties are not just against pests, but also that are more resistant, for instance, against drought stress or heat or other climate changes. And they all say we need to make this plant food production more attractive, and that more people want to do that, more young people, because we don't have enough people to work on that. So, we need sustainable plants for future. As I said, we need to increase food, and plants are an important part of food, so we need sustainable plants. And so to make things now together, what can we do? Well, we need to find peat alternatives. I was mentioning that. This is really a big project of our government, and there are many research projects going on because we need to take out the peat, but we need to find alternatives that the plant producers can produce the same way their plants and don't have problems on that. So many projects are going on. For instance, this Topka is a project that is running in our institute. The coordination of this big project is done in our institute, and there are still many others. So researchers are trying to find peat alternatives for the plant producers. Organic farming, it's very important thing for the future if we want to protect our environment. And so this is something that we should really think of it in the future and invest research for that also. New varieties, yes, we need new varieties because climate is changing, so we have to cope with drought more and more with higher temperatures and so on. So we need to invest in breeding programs that select these varieties. Genetic modified organisms, this is a big question mark. I will talk a bit later about that because they are not really accepted by the public. Precise farming, this is something very important. We need to produce plants more, but we need to produce them also better. This means we have to save on water, for instance, in plant production. We have to save on fertilizers that we use. We have to use it better because we are wasting this also, not optimizing the fertilizers that we are using, and so on. We have to spare energy in the plant. So precise farming is a very important field for the future, to try to produce, but to produce it better. Vertical farming is also a new field, sometimes can be very important, particularly if there's not enough space. but it's also a way of producing plants where one can spare water, fertilizers, for instance. But what we really need are new solutions for plant protection, right? And so this is something that the science has to invest on it, and we scientists, we plant scientists, need to work on that. So we need to get fit plants, yeah? And what do we need for fit plants? And what are fit plants? So plants, if you think of plants, they are really incredible organisms because they are bound to the place where they grow. They cannot move if something goes wrong around them, right? So, and they perceive everything that's going on around them. So they have to cope with heat, with cold. They are not like us. So if we have too much heat, we can go to a shadow place or to a cooler place, or if it's too cold, we go to a warmer place. Plants cannot do that. They are there and they have to cope there with that. The same with drought, flooding. They have to cope with that. Also with mechanical stress that can happen, strong wind, strong rain, they have to cope with that to survive. UV, radiation that might happen. But also biotic stresses like microorganisms, yeah? Bacteria, fungi, virus, insects, even small animals or even us. We can be stressful for plants. So plants, they are there. They have to cope with all the variations that happen in their environment, right? And they have to adjust to survive. So if these changes in their environment are too strong or too much, plants will be stressed because this is too much for them and they have to react and they are stressed. So how this happens? The plants are there in their place where they grow, where they are bound, and they perceive. They perceive everything that's going on around them. They perceive these signals, they integrate this information in their biological systems. Sometimes they even store this information for later, so they even learn, and they have to adjust, and adjust fast to survive, right? So these are the 3 steps of this plant stress. So perception, integration, adjustment. And so the question is, what can we scientists do to help plants to better cope with plant stress, right? So first of all, we have to understand what's going on in the plant. So we have to understand all these 3 steps, how they perceive these differences in a particular signal in their environment, how they integrate this in their biological systems, how they store, if they store, and how they adjust. So these are the 3 steps we have to understand if we want to help plants to better cope with stresses. And so now I'm giving you some examples of what we scientists do to try to help plants to cope with some of these stresses. And I want to start by talking about mechanical stress, because maybe it's the one that you thought less, thigmomorphogenesis. So what is thigmomorphogenesis? Thigmo means touch, and morphogenesis means change in form, shape, or flowering. And so if you look to this tree, it's an olive tree by the Douro River in the north of Portugal, you see that this tree, because it's in a windy place, grows not too tall and a bit bended, yeah? And this happens in nature. If you go around, you can see in nature in some windy places that the plants that grow there, they are shorter and more compact. Yeah, so in Japan, children and seniors go to the fields of wheat and barley and apply very soft mechanical stress to the young plants. They walk on the plants, or step on the plants. And this is something that is called mugifumi. It's a very old tradition with more than 500 years. And why do they do that? Well, they do that because they know that these plants later will be stronger and will give more grain, so more yield. In horticulture, we are already applying some mechanical stress. For instance, here in these basil plants, they are treated with a plastic ribbon that goes over several times per day, and doing that, the plants grow more compact and shorter. So it's used instead of using growth retardant, chemical growth retardants, when the producers want to keep the plants short and more compact, right? So all of these are examples of thigmomorphogenesis, and actually this was already described by Darwin, this effect of mechanical stress that makes the plant smaller. But the molecular basis for that was not known, and was not known until very recently. And here at the TU, we analyzed that. So we wanted to understand why. Why are plants shorter when they are touched or when they have this mechanical stress? And for that, we use this model plant, which is Arabidopsis. It's the model plant for plant biologists. And you can see that in this picture, where the T means touch, UT means untouched. So the touched plants, indeed, they grow shorter. We touch these plants twice per day for 2 weeks. And you can see the difference in the plants, yeah? So when we look to these plants, as plant physiologists, we try to understand why are they like that. And we thought, there might be, sorry about that, there might be a problem in their gibberellins. Gibberellins are plant hormones that regulate many developmental processes and also are very much involved in growth of plants. So we thought, maybe there is something with these plant hormones in these touched plants. And so what we did was to measure these plant hormones in both plants, and we could see that indeed the touched plants had less of these bioactive gibberellins. So we thought, our hypothesis was correct. And then we wanted to understand still, why do they have less gibberellins? So we looked for the expression of the genes that are involved in these gibberellin pathways in the untouched and the touched plants and compared that. And we could see that 3 genes were regulated in the touched plants. So what we did then afterwards to understand which of them was important for that, we analyzed mutants. And mutants were plants that are impaired in one of these genes. So we had 3 mutants, one for each gene, and we looked for these plants and how they react to touch. And this is an example. One of the genes, this is called 2OX7. This is on the right side. And you see that this mutant that cannot express this 2OX7, you can touch these plants as much as you want, they are not shorter compared to the wild-type plants that are on the left, yeah? They are normal, and on the right, this is this mutant. And actually, the other 2 mutants of the other 2 genes react like the normal plants, like wild-type. So we found out the responsible gene for this thigmomorphogenesis, for this response to touch. Right? So touch-induced morphological changes that are dependent on GA breakdown on this GA2OX7, because this GA2OX7 is an enzyme, so this gene codes for an enzyme that catabolize this bioactive gibberellins. So make sure that in the plant there are less bioactive gibberellins, so less growth. So we found out the reason for thigmomorphogenesis. Then we had this thought. Plants like us, like all living organisms, we have a certain budget of energy. So if we use too much of this energy for growth, we will have less for defense. If we use more for defense, we will have less for growth. And so we thought that, for example, if we touch the plants and they have less growth, maybe they are more resistant, they have a higher defense for other things. This was our hypothesis. And so we wanted to check that. And the first challenge that we wanted to check was an increase in temperature. So temperature is increasing, right? So we have a global average surface temperature that is increasing. If you see this in this graph, we have a reference period from 19 to 2000, and we see that in the last years, it's these red bars, so the temperature is increasing. And if you saw the German news on the 1st of January on the German TV, you saw this picture that is on the right side. So the average temperature in Germany is increasing. So temperature is increasing and plants have to cope with it. So now we looked for increased temperature in Arabidopsis plants, our model plant. And you can see here on the left side that plants, Arabidopsis plants that are growing at higher temperature, 28 degrees, they grow faster and they are taller compared to the plants that are grown at 20 degrees. And together with colleagues from Strasbourg, from the CNRS, we found out that this is again due to these plant hormones, these gibberellins. And indeed, there is this GA12, which is a precursor for the GA4, which is a bioactive gibberellin. It moves when the temperature increases. It moves from the root to the shoot. And there's more than precursor, more plant hormone, and the plants grow taller. So then you might say, and what is the problem with that? They grow faster, they are taller. Great. Not always. There are some problems in some plants with that. For instance, barley. Barley is a plant that, if the temperature increases, grows too fast, and then you will have less grain. You'll have less seeds, less yield. Actually, I think 2 years ago, there was a very interesting paper in Nature saying that we will have problems to produce beer in Europe because we don't produce enough barley. And we don't produce enough barley because the temperature is increasing. So it's not good for all plants. Therefore, we wanted to know how can we help plants in this situation. How can we regulate that then, if an increase in temperature happens? And we know from our work before, from this touch, that if we touch the plants, we decrease this GA12, this precursor. So we thought, if the reason for them to increase in growth is because this GA12 is getting more, if we touch that, maybe we can compensate that. And so is what we did, that is in the right side. You have the plants that are at 22 degrees and plants that are at 28 degrees, and you see UT, so untouched, and T, touched plants. And you can see, so 22 degrees, normal situation. And if you compare the plants at 28 untouched to the 22 untouched, you see they are taller, so like here in this model, yeah? But if we touch them, we reach the same level as the untouched at 22 degrees. So touch can reduce the increase in plant height due to increased temperature. So this is a powerful way that we can use if we need to suddenly regulate the growth of a plant because of high temperature, right? So this has a practical application. If you think of this, for instance, that you have now plants that are there, and you don't want them to grow very fast, and then the temperature increases and you want to compensate that, well, you can do it by touch. Another challenge that plants have is increase in drought. And again, so these are data from the Helmholtz-Zentrum für Umweltforschung, and you can see these graphs. On the right is the reference period, so 1971 to 2000, and then you have the drought area and the drought duration. And by 3 degrees global warming, we will have double droughts and 3 times longer droughts, right? So this is the situation. And plants, we have to cope with it. So again, we used our model plant Arabidopsis, and on the top, what you see are plants that are happy because they get water. And on the left is the col0, this is wild type, normal plants, and on the right side as this touch gene mutant that we always use. And on the bottom side there is drought. So these plants didn't have water. We stopped watering them. And some of the plants were untouched, some were touched. And you can see there in the figure that the touched plants for the wild type look much better than the untouched ones. So they cope better with this drought stress if you touch them. right? And the mutant not, because the mutant cannot respond to this touch that we apply. So touched wild-type plants are more tolerant to drought stress. And this was not observed in our mutant, of course, in our touch gene mutant. So now I want to tell you a little story. And it's the following. So when we published this work of touch, we were contacted by a German TV channel that wanted to make a program about this, our findings. And they said, yeah, we want to do this program, but we actually would like to try by ourselves if we can regulate growth by touch. And we said to them, yes, of course, you can. Just go to market, buy some plants, and you same size more or less, you touch some, you don't touch the others, and after 2 weeks you will see an effect. And they did this in their office in Berlin. And so they came to us, they made the program, and also they brought the plants and asked us, so which plants did we touch, with which ones we didn't? And the labels were underneath the pot, so we couldn't see that. And we said there was clear effect. So we said, these were the touched ones, these were not touched, so you did a good job, you did it like it should be. And they were happy, and we were happy. And then they gave me 2 plants as thank you. And I brought these plants to my home, to the terrace, and forgot them. And I forgot them, and 10 days, approximately 10 days later, I go outside and see these plants. And say, oh, I forgot to water them. And when I looked underneath the pots, it was what is written there. The left one was touched, the right one was untouched. And you see the difference. So the untouched looks miserable compared to the touched one, right? So of course this is not a scientific experiment, but it shows that this is not just in Arabidopsis, that we can really do this with other plants. We can compensate this drought stress by touching the plants before. They are prepared, right? So they are more prepared for defense, and they will resist better to drought. Okay, so now I want to show you something else, also about drought. And this is a work that is done by colleagues, by Japanese colleagues. Very recently, it's published very, very recently, where they show also that by adding a solution of ethanol to the soil, they prepare rice and wheat plants for drought. They help rice and wheat plants to cope better with drought. And here is what they present in their publication. So you can see on the top wheat plants, and water means they were just watered with water, and ethanol means that they got 3 days of a solution of ethanol. It's a very weak ethanol solution. And then they had drought stress. So you can see they cope much better with drought. On the bottom are the rice plants, also water. So they suffer a lot from drought. And the ones that had before an ethanol solution, they cope much better with drought, right? So if you now look to the graphs, you can see their survival rate. So on the top, for wheat, you see that the plants that had just water before the drought stress, they almost do not survive. The ones that had ethanol, they survive much better. And the same with rice. So this is a great idea and a great solution to apply to the plants to cope better, that they can cope better with drought stress. Okay, but there are also other examples that how can we help plants to cope also with biotic stress. And in this case is also a work published by a French group where they show that they can help plants, tomato, salad, and peppers to cope better with infections of fungi, so Botrytis cinereisa fungi, or oomycetes, so Phytophthora. And what they did, they use treatment by ultraviolet C. And so UVC, it's a part of the solar spectrum that doesn't reach us and the plants normally because it's filtered by the ozone layer. But plants can perceive that, and they respond to that. And so what they did is that they did a very, very short treatment of the plants. This is 1 flash means 1 minute treatment, 1 time. And 4 flashes means 4 times 1 second, with every 2 days. And after that, they infect, so they treat the plants before, and then they infect the plants with this fungi. For instance, for the tomatoes, you can see the eye means 2 days after infection, 3 days after infection. You see that the lesions that are caused by this fungi in the leaves of the plant are smaller for the plants that were treated by UVC. And you see this for tomato, for salad, and for peppers. So this is powerful method also. It's a good treatment to increase the resistance to fungi and other biotic stresses. But actually, this UVC is really a powerful method, but unfortunately, there's not much known of the molecular basis for that, and is one of my research areas. I'm trying to understand why plants respond to UVC and how they respond, that one can better adjust these treatments. So what I showed you was some priming strategies for plant stress management. So what I show is that if we understand how plants perceive these stresses and how they integrate and how they react to these stresses, if we understand the molecular basis for that, we can help them because we can optimize these growth defense levels that they have. And actually what is there are several plant hormones. Plant hormones are extremely important regulators of these processes of growth and defense. And for growth, I told you some examples where gibberellins were involved, but there are also racinosteroids, auxin, and for defense, jasmonate, salicylic acid. So if we know that, and then if we can measure that in the plant and see in which state they are, more growth and more defense, we can maybe try to adjust this in the plant and help them to cope better with different stresses. So I hope I could convince you that priming is a good strategy for plant stress management. Of course, there are new genomic techniques, and you've maybe heard about trim plants, plants that are drought resistant, temperature resistant, disease resistant, and you can knock in genes, edit different bases in their DNA, CRISPR-Cas, whatever, many, many different things. But currently, there are no GMOs that can be cultivated commercially in Germany, and the European Union is expected to publish a draft regulation by the second quarter of this year. So we don't know what is the future of GMOs. Another thing, so I told you some political goals for sustainability. I told you about plant producers, how important plants are for our food and the wishes and the problems that plant producers have. I show you some examples from the science, what we try to do to help plants to cope better with some stresses. But for sustainability, we can also, all of us, contribute. And this I want to show some example by doing some home and community gardens, for instance, right? So this is a picture of a garden that is very close by to here. It's called this Ludwig's Garden. It's a project that is coordinated by a colleague of mine, Dr. Falco Feldman, and he created this garden with the Lebenshilfe. And these are extremely nice examples. What can we do? Because if we have our own garden, we increase biodiversity, for instance. We reduce CO2. It's an important cultural thing because we meet people, we can share ideas, so it's also nice for that. It's important for a better health. We can produce plants, we can eat them, so we can eat healthier plants. Might be an economic advantage because if we produce the plants, well, we have them for ourselves, but maybe also for selling or for exchanging from other things with others. It's a very big thing for community development right? So these home and community gardens have the three important points of sustainability, that is environmental, economic, and social. So all of this we can contribute as well if we start having our little gardens. So now to summarize and put everything together, we need fit plants for future, right? To have this, against this big challenge that is to get enough food for everyone. But this is not, of course, an easy task. We need higher crop yields, we need resistant plants, we have to do it at lower costs, and we have to produce them sustainable. So we need to protect nature. We have to deal with climate change, right, in our plant production. We have to, so with all the changes that are happening and will happen, and plants, we have to cope with it. We have to save energy. It's also not easy for the plant producers to do so sometimes. And we have to produce plants that have good quality. Not just that are healthier, that are good in that quality, but they're also tasty, that we like to eat them. So definitely we need new methodologies and we need more research for that. So I hope I show you that one possibility is really to prime plants and to help them by priming them, by understanding them, how they perceive what's going on around them, that we can prime them and help them then to cope better with stressful situations. So if one thinks for fit plants for future, I think big chances remain ahead. And I think big chances for plant scientists remain ahead to help plants to be fit and that we produce enough for everybody. And for finishing, I have to thank I would like to thank some of my colleagues, because the results that I present here, I didn't do this alone. And here in Braunschweig, so the group of the Professor Theo Lange, and there's also co-workers. In Munich, Professor Brigitte Poppenberg is a long collaborator. In France, the group of the CNRS by Dr. Patrick Achard and his co-workers. Now my new colleagues, Dr. Ute Vogler and Monika Gotz in the JKI, and the Volkswagen Stiftung Serkel Gutenberg and University for financing support. And I put you back in this slide, and yeah, I will be happy to answer questions if you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dankeschön. Gibt es schon Fragen?
Thank you so much for the lecture. There are some fun facts about plants in it. And my question is, like producing plants, we are trying once again like to play with the nature so we can get food from it. And my question is, how is it for like gene techniques when we use it? I know that from the seas, like the salmons, there are like salmons that are produced, and when they get out to the sea, like they dominate other fishes and they eat them, and not eat them, but like they dominate them, and the genes, they are not that good or that fit for the nature. So how is it when we play with the whole nature or the whole like plants world? How would it respond? Maybe the nature would respond, like be against us. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a very, very important point, and it's not an easy answer. Well, I think that these genetic modified plants are powerful, yes. But we have to think, I don't think they are the solution. Because if you think of a plant, for instance, you make a plant that is drought resistant or high temperature resistant. You put it in the field, but the temperature might be not always, for instance, high. And maybe this plant then cannot cope good if the temperature just decreases, right? So maybe this plant is actually not fit in a sense that can adjust easily to other changes that will happen as well, right? Because this is for optimal or for kind of laboratory conditions, but in the reality, it might be that there are other factors that come from the nature or whatever, the competition from other plants, I don't know. So I think that is smarter to do it differently, and this is why I try to explain it by priming. It's to apply when we need. So adjust something when we need to, and not always, right? So not having it always adjusted, but just when we need it. So like not having plants that are always resistant to high temperature, but just to help them to cope when the temperature is high, okay? So I think this is smarter in that way, to avoid problems like that. And so this is my opinion. So I think if we would do something like that, we would do it better. So I don't know, but if for certain cases, it might be that really this is a good solution for extreme cases, when we really need to produce plants in very special conditions and we need really to fight against hunger in very special conditions. Yeah, I mean, we have been doing genetic modified things for a long time. We just don't call them like this, right? But the breeders actually do that. They cross to get a better plants, but they do it slowly. They can maybe adjust more the process. Okay, the new technologies do it very precisely. Yeah, it's a compromise. In my opinion and this is why I was just saying to you, we should grow more and better, but precisely. This means not just increasing production and making plants, but do it when we need. So the plants are there, we understand what's going on in the plant, and when they are having problems, we try then to act and to adjust. This is my opinion.
We have a question online.
Mm-hmm.
How long should this priming period be? And when touching the plants, for how long do you do it? Minutes per day?
Oh yeah, very good question. You saw on this picture, what I show you, that they are doing this with these basil plants, with these ribbons there. Well, I would say this is not optimal. They are doing too much. You don't need to do as much as that. But this is the problem. You need to understand first, with science, how the plants are reacting to that, to adjust it, to optimize, and not just by trial and error. Yeah? So they definitely do too much. We did this with Arabidopsis, and we could see that you don't need as much. You need to touch 2 times per day in the beginning, and after 1 week is saturated. You can touch as much as you want. The plant will not respond more to that. You have already the maximum, right? So we need to look at that. This is Arabidopsis. With other plants, we have to adjust that. So we have to look in the laboratory. We have to check the status of the plant. We have to do some touching programs and study the kinetics of the response. So to see how they are responding and say, okay, this is enough. I don't need to do more. And then we can do the treatment. So this is how science can really help in practice to make these programs to prime plants.
Well, your findings about the effect of touching on the drought response are very interesting to me. I'm a plant physiologist, and I have studied drought effects on plants. And do you have an idea about the mechanism? So does touching result in a change in phytohormones and then, for example, much more root growth, something like that? Or did it have an effect on stomata density or stomata regulation?
Yeah, very good question. We are still working on that to try to understand the full process. But what we know is that, yes, plant hormones are regulated. And so when we touch, the levels of gibberellins are regulated. Actually, the bioactive compounds, bioactive gibberellins go down. But it's not just gibberellins. There are other compounds, other plant hormones that are also regulated. Jasmonates is another plant hormone that normally is for defense, more related to defense. But we know that, for instance, jasmonates increase. And we know that so the growth is retarded a little bit, but the plants can then cope better with the drought. For the stomata, we think is also regulated by the gibberellins, but we are still looking for the real key regulators that will make then the stomata close and so on. So we don't know exactly which is the regulator. We are not yet there, but we are looking for it. Yeah, I mean, together with our colleagues in France, to try to find out the real mechanism. But the hormones we know already, so we know that really the gibberellins decrease by touching, and the jasmonates increase.
Maybe I first some very general question about some remarks at the beginning of your talk. If I understood it right, might be wrong. You said that a third of the plant food production is not used but wasted. Is that number right?
Yes, I read it today. Yeah.
So my questions are: does this refer to human food? And of course, from where did you get this number? And if the number is given, then I wonder where it is wasted, at the producer's site or in supermarkets or in households. Can you specify this a bit?
No, it's everything. This is the big number of, I think, everything together. But this is for us, for food. For instance, they were showing that in, I think, Egypt, there's a big problem of their tomato production, for instance, that they produce the tomatoes and then they have problems in delivering that in the food chain process, and so the producers produce and then they are just rotten, and so they cannot sell that. This is a problem. So in the producers themselves, that sometimes they cannot optimize the storage of their products, for instance, right? So this, that we all know from supermarkets, fresh plant food is very labile, so it cannot keep it for very long. And so if you don't have the good conditions to do that, and you waste it. So we produce and waste, or if you cannot sell it immediately, for instance. If there is a problem, like there was also during, for instance, COVID, that there was the problem in delivering plant food for other places, then they are there and for nothing. But also at home, we are wasting a lot of
we not so much.
When I say we say everyone. Yeah.
Okay, but if a bit less than a tenth of the world population, which is quite a lot, is starving hunger, and if a third is wasted, then this sounds to me more like a distribution problem than a production problem.
It is also. It is. We are producing enough food, but it's not reaching enough people.
Okay, I have two further questions, if I'm allowed to do this. One is scientific and the other one is technical. Scientific question, I'm a soil scientist, and I was yeah, it was quite striking when you showed on your slide number 26 this ethanol treatment of the soil, where the plants in the soil with ethanol survived much, much, much better. And so my first question is, of course, was the same amount of water in the system or not? So, because the process is, of course, very interesting. Is it the ability of the plants to access more water of the water that is available? Or was it simply the reaction that the amount of water which could be held by the soil was higher in the case of ethanol? Ethanol is known to reduce the contact angle between water and organic substance in particular. So if the experiment was started with pots which held water against gravity, then I would suggest that the amount of water which was held in the ethanol-treated cases was much, much higher. And so it was more a soil thing than a plant thing. So the question is, was it the same amount of water?
Yeah, the Japanese scientists did a good job, and they took care of it. So first of all, they kept, when they start the drought, they made sure that there was the same amount of water before the drought period starts. So this means the plants were in the same water status. And then they start the drought. So they did that, they measured that, yeah.
Okay, so do you have a hypothesis for the process which explains this huge difference?
Why this is, why these plants have, it's the same as plant hormones. They are regulated. So they did that also. They looked actually they did gene expression. So they looked for a lot of the genes that are expressed and not. And some of them are involved in the regulation of plant hormones, in gibberellins, jasmonic acid. Same what we had also in Arabidopsis. But they also don't have yet the final mechanism. So research is still going on. But we know that the hormones are regulated, yes, in both cases. But this is very promising. It's a very recent work, and it's incredible, the results they got, yeah.
Okay, so we need more alcohol. And if I'm allowed, the final technical question is with respect to this touching. It became obvious that you are a huge fan of this priming by touching.
Yeah.
I was just wondering whether you have ideas how this could be done on the large-scale agricultural practice which we have. So, because there you cannot go on the areas and touch the plants always. So.
Yeah. Well, actually, Japanese. Well, I'm not saying that we now all the children of the kindergarten and seniors will have to go to the fields and do that. The Japanese do that for 500 years in this way. But we can do it, of course, and they also use machines nowadays for that. You can do that. There are actually machines that are just used in the field that could do the job. You know, that there are some machines for taking bad herbs and so on, that if you adjust this, that is not too strong. If you just go with the machine over the field, you can do that. So you can touch plants. And you don't need much. If you talk to the people that design machines for agriculture and say, I would like to do this mechanical stress, they have a lot of ideas. This is not a difficult thing to do. Already with the machines that they are using. It's just that maybe to adjust it, that is not too strong, but the machines are already there. You just need to make the programs to do this treatment. That's what you need.
So my question is, how long would you think would it take to implement your findings in the food industry, like in the real world? And what's your opinion? How is the probability of this, after all, to be implemented?
Well, you see, for instance, this touch is already used in horticulture. Instead of using chemicals as growth retardants, they already use that. So this can be done if there is interest for that. But the problem is not these treatments. The problem is that if you want to do it correctly and precisely, you need first to understand for each plant what's going on in the plant. So how better you do that? Because I don't know, probably you don't have to touch the same way Arabidopsis, the model plant, or another plant. So you have to do this. So you need science for that develops these programs together with the plant producers and say, okay, for this plant and this treatment, you would need to treat as much and how long, as longer to get the effect. So I think it's not a problem to implement this in practical. Well, because these are not difficult treatments. It's not something that needs a lot of technology and a lot of things. But you need, the problem there is to understand what's going on in the plant, and not just doing by trial and error, because it's a waste, right? So when I see what they do with the basil plants, I would say it's far too much. I'm sure it's far too much. But yeah, so we need plant scientists to analyze that.
Yes, thank you very much for your input. My question is like, how do biologic inputs for the plants like affect the growth and defense strength? Because like in the nature, like plants are also confronted with mechanical inputs. Like you gave the example with the tree and the wind, but like we were wondering what effects maybe rain or other plants or other animals have on growth of plants. And does this effect does it work with every plant, or are there any restrictions?
But do you mean the touch or all these environmental things? What I didn't understand. Do you mean just for the mechanical stress or for all these stresses?
Yes,
mechanical stress.
Especially for the mechanical stress.
For mechanical stress, yeah.
For example, by rain or heavy rain.
This is a normal effect for all plants. All plants will respond to that. And yeah, if you, as I said, if you go around and you see in very windy places, you will see that, like Darwin was seeing and describing. That, when plants are grown in these places, they are shorter, they flower later. This is a very typical reaction. So this happens in nature, yes. And and that's why we've thought of trying to understand that, because incredibly some things are like that. They happen, and everyone knows for a long time, but no one really thought of why it's like that. So this is what we tried to understand. And then we thought, understanding that, we may provoke that and help plants in other situations. Yeah, this is all a bit like science is, but it's a general, very, very general effect for all plants, yeah.
Maybe a final one from my side. It was quite impressive to see the differing growth of the plants at 22 degrees and 28 degrees cultivated. But generally, I can imagine this is quite typical, so they grow faster. I don't know whether they are in the end also then, when they stop growing that higher. But if you look now on climate change, it does not only become warmer, and we do have a lot of experience at different sites on the world about different climates, warmer conditions and so on, and we cannot say in general terms that it's worse at warmer conditions. But we have at the same time an increase in the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. And it's now, of course, very interesting to see what is the combined effect of these two variables. So 2 degrees Celsius higher temperatures here in Germany, and at the same time maybe 20, 30, 40% more of CO2 in the air. Do you know what the reaction of the plants in general will be on this double effect?
No, I don't know. Maybe there is some research on that. Personally, no. I don't know. So before I say something wrong, no, I don't know. But maybe there is already some research done on that aspect. I myself didn't do that, so I didn't look for the figures. Yeah, but yes, a good question. Maybe double effect is different. But anyway, what I can say is, well, for instance, for barley, they didn't take this into account, this factor. So they did it's a very big study done on that, on Europe, on barley production, because barley is really sensitive to this. Not all plants are so sensitive to temperatures, to 28 degrees. For some plants, this temperature is normal. No? So this, what I showed was for Arabidopsis, because for this plant, you can see that at this temperature. But for barley, it is indeed a real problem. So the plants are also responding similar to this, so they grow faster, but you have less grain, less yield, because they put all their energy to grow fast, and then there is not enough to fill the grains for later. But there was no, in this study for sure, no input of the amounts of CO2. Maybe it's complicated to do so, combining both, but I don't know. So I would have to look for it. It's interesting. I will have a look because, yeah, I didn't think of it, but it's maybe important to think of both factors, yeah.
I think you heard once that has effects on the protein content of the grains.
The CO2, yeah, could be. I never did any work with CO2, but yeah, I will have a look. It's an interesting point, yeah.
Okay, thanks again.
Welcome.
Eine kleine Anmerkung für nächste Woche noch. Der Vortrag von Herrn Leinfelder muss nämlich leider aus gesundheitlichen Gründen ausfallen, aber wir konnten ganz glücklicherweise einen Ersatz finden. Ganz spontan ist Professor Bernd Engel eingesprungen und wird nächste Woche über notwendige Elemente des klimaneutralen Energiesystems referieren. Also es ändert sich eigentlich nichts für Sie. Sie kommen einfach nächste Woche wieder und hören dann nur einen anderen Vortrag. Das war's. Bis nächste Woche.
Thank you.